I'm announcing a historic action to rescue our nation's capital from crime, bloodshed, bedlam, and squalor, and worse. This is Liberation Day in D.C., and we're going to take our capital back. We're taking it back. Under the authorities vested in me as the President of the United States, I'm officially invoking Section 740 of the District of Columbia Home Rule Act. You know what that is? And placing the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department under direct federal control, and you'll be meeting the people that will be directly involved with that. Very good people, but they're tough, and they know what's happening, and they've done it before. In addition, I'm deploying the National Guard to help reestablish law, order, and public safety in Washington, D.C., and they're going to be allowed to do their job properly. The murder rate in Washington today is higher than that of Bogota, Colombia, Mexico City, some of the places that you hear about as being the worst places on earth. Much higher. This is much higher. The number of car thefts has doubled over the past 5 years, and the number of carjackings has more than tripled. Murders in 2023 reached the highest rate. Our capital city has been overtaken by violent gangs and bloodthirsty criminals, roving mobs of wild youth, drugged-out maniacs and homeless people. And we're not going to let it happen anymore. We're not going to take it. We're starting very strongly with D.C., and we're going to clean it up real quick, very quickly, as they say. Days ago, a former member of the Doge staff was savagely beaten by a band of roving thugs after defending a young woman from an attempted carjacking. He was left dripping in blood. He thought he was dead, with a broken nose and concussion. Can't believe that he's alive. He can't believe it. In June, a 21-year-old congressional intern was tragically killed after being hit by a stray bullet in a drive-by shooting. A former Trump administration official named Mike Gill, fantastic person, was murdered last year in cold blood in a carjacking blocks away from the White House. We all knew him. Great person. Waiting for his wife as she was walking to the car. A Democrat congressman was also carjacked at gunpoint not far from the Capitol. And in 2023, an aide to Senator Rand Paul was stabbed in the chest and head by a demented lunatic as he walked down the street, just absolutely for no reason. Horrifically, last July 4th weekend, a 3-year-old girl was shot in the head and killed while sitting in a car near the Capitol. It's becoming a situation of complete and total lawlessness. And we're getting rid of the slums, too. We have slums here. We're getting rid of them. I know it's not politically correct. You'll say, oh, so terrible. No, we're getting rid of the slums where they live. Caravans of mass youth rampage through city streets at all times of the day. They're in ATVs, motorbikes. They travel pretty well. Entire neighborhoods are now under emergency curfews. Just this past weekend, gunfire went through, and you saw that, the Navy Yard. I saw it this morning. They saw that they fought back against, let's see, they fight back until you knock the hell out of them, because it's the only language they understand. But they fought back against law enforcement last night. And they're not going to be fighting back long, because I've instructed them. And today we're formally declaring a public safety emergency. This is an emergency. This is a tragic emergency. And it's embarrassing for me to be up here. You know, I'm going to see Putin. I'm going to Russia on Friday. I don't like being up here talking about how unsafe and how dirty and disgusting this once beautiful capital was, with graffiti all over the walls. It's another part of it, by the way, because we're talking about safety, but we're also talking about beautification. We're the most beautiful, potentially, capital in the world. We always had. But people come from Iowa, they come from Indiana, they come and then they get mugged. Not going to happen. Keep coming, because by the time you get your trip set, it's going to be safe again, and it's going to be clean very quickly. We're going to replace the medians that are falling down all over the roads. We're going to replace the potholes. We're going to put a nice new coat of asphalt over the top. No, we don't have to rip the road out and spend 7 years building a new road because they cut everything. Because some designer said, well, we need a 1/4 of an inch more turn for safety reasons. No, we're going to do it right. We're going to get it done quickly.
We are getting new video of the National Guard arriving in Washington, D.C. after President Trump called them in to help bring order to our nation's capital. Reaction is pouring in from the left surrounding President Trump's major crime crackdown. And they're seething, all because President Trump wants to keep Americans safe. Now, President Trump says the National Guard and temporary federal control of the D.C. police will help him to clean up D.C. streets once and for all. But for some reason, Democrats aren't happy.
What the president did this morning was political theater. His idea in federalizing the police force of D.C. ignores the reality. They are making dramatic progress in reducing violent crime in D.C.
Focus those cameras on everything that's going on, because this president is trying to lead us into what could be called a civil war.
I call it an abuse of power, right? The only reason this can happen to us in Washington, D.C. is because we are not a state. In no other city can the president take over the local police force. And I think that is ridiculous and insane.
And more reactions pouring in on social media, with House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries telling the president to, quote, get lost. Wow. And failed presidential candidate Hillary Clinton calling him unhinged. Meanwhile, anti-Trump protesters hit the streets, pushing back against the crime crackdown by singing.
DC is our home. You can have it from. DC is our home. You can have it from.
The liberal media is joining the chorus as well.
Maybe it's not about crime. Maybe it's that he really enjoys using U.S. military force against American civilians on American soil and wants any excuse to do it anywhere he can.
Chris, to be honest with you, I'm trying to hold my temper. I think there's an ongoing argument that he's having in his head with Black Lives Matter. We have to understand this, Chris, within the context of Donald Trump's racial politics. He's actually trying to give his base red meat to get them off of the Epstein story, and it's on the backs of citizens in Washington, D.C.
And the Washington Post is getting called out for quoting one D.C. resident who claimed the city was safe, but also requested to speak anonymously off the record over, quote, concerns of personal safety. Bill, you can't make this stuff up, but at the end of the day, it's tragic because these are people's lives that are getting lost.
There was a statistic we did on America's Newsroom earlier today on carjackings in Washington, D.C. The numbers are astonishing here. 56% of the carjackings are committed by people who are age 18 or younger.
Wow.
All right, where are you going to stop that, right?
And not only are most of them committed by those minors, but they've also spiked in prevalence, up 600% almost in just 5 years alone. So let's talk about, how we got here, Kennedy. So we had Biden's former chief of staff. He was on Fox and Friends this morning with this explanation for what might be driving the youth behind this crime problem. Let's take a watch.
D.C. for 2022 to 2023 had about 40% of kids that faced chronic absentee. So that means they missed 10% or more of the school year. Well, where are those kids when they're not in school? They're outside causing a little bit of chaos. They're raiding grocery stores, drug stores. They're putting entire sections of the city under curfew. And the fact of the matter is the president is addressing something that is very real. We can live in this city and say it's a beautiful city, and we can also say that we have a chronic issue when it comes to our youth.
Right. Both are indeed true. And we've had on this network many times the mother of the slain congressional intern who is mourning her son and acknowledging that this is our nation's capital, and also it is not safe.
No, it's not safe, but they point to the homicide rate, and that is not the only lens by which people look at crime or by which people, more importantly, experience crime. And, the perception anytime you have one of these carjackings or violent assaults, the perception is that this is an unsafe place. And, D.C. should be a magnet for international visitors to come and get a taste of the very best of our country. But instead, people show up in D.C. and they worry they're going to be mugged. They're worried they're going to be shot. And Tyrus pointed something out on the 5 last weeks, which I thought was an interesting way of looking at this. So if you've got kids, and this is why Judge Jeanine Pirro is really frustrated in her new role, you can't charge, if you've got kids committing felony carjacking at 14, 15, 16 years old, you can't charge them as adults, although they're committing adult crimes, especially, 10 of them beating up big balls, that poor bastard. But, if you can't do that, then you've got older people, maybe in gangs, who know that these kids are not going to be incarcerated. So why not use them to commit the crimes that would have you sent away for a decade? And so that's what they're doing. They're taking advantage of the system. They're also taking advantage of kids who don't have a lot of oversight, who are being failed by their parents, as well as the horrible D.C. schools who spend more per pupil than any other school district in the country.
Right. And we spoke about this before, Harris, that the recidivism rate for these youth exceeds that of these adult repeat offenders. So it's grooming and creating. It's not just youth gone wild. I mean, it's a horrifically violent statistic that is real life. Congressman Henry Cuellar, we have a headline that we can pop up in just October of 2023, got carjacked at gunpoint. And to Kennedy's point, unless one of these youth actually kills someone with their gun, it still is not federal, and they still do not see jail time.
Well, and even the U.S. Attorney for D.C., Jeanine Pirro, said yesterday, I mean, she can get a conviction on that, and then you march in, and the judge is like, well, wait a minute, when it comes to sentencing and other things, and she kind of made a joke, but I don't know if she was kidding. They get off and go to college. Like those were her words.
What I don't understand is all of these protesters and these liberal crying voices on these media shows that are downplaying people's experiences. No, that's not what the statistics show. Well, what showed me is when I got carjacked. What showed me is when I got jumped and assaulted, etc. So just blocks from those protesters that were singing, a man was shot and killed. We have that headline, too, that we can pop up on the screen. So how are they living such dual reality lives when the real reality is no one is safe in D.C. until now?
ABC anchor yesterday talking about how where the ABC bureau is in Washington, D.C., that there were 2 shootings nearby in the last 6 months, that she's been jumped, that her colleague's car had been carjacked that morning, right? And you also have the D.C. police union chief saying, look, we need this, praising what President Trump is doing. And to your earlier point, he's absolutely within the law of what he's trying to do. First of all, D.C. is so different than any other country in America because the Constitution grants Congress the ultimate authority over Washington, D.C. Also, federal statutes give him the authority over the D.C. National Guard. And then the Home Rule Act gives him the authority to take over the D.C. police in cases of emergency. So he's completely within his rights. And, you know, this reminds us of the cheap flakes, right? Where the media are telling us to not believe things that are directly in front of us and the things that are so obvious. So I think that citizens of D.C. understand this. Most of America understands this. The left, you know, they don't want us to believe.
Bedlam. The city was in bedlam after the big storm hit. Roving. The roving gang caused trouble throughout the neighborhood. Slum. Many families live in the slums with poor living conditions. Rampage. The protesters went on a rampage, breaking windows and cars. Median. The car crashed into the median strip on the highway. Chronic. He suffers from chronic back pain. Unhinged. The unhinged man started yelling at strangers on the street.
If you enjoy this content, please consider subscribing to my channel to stay up to date with future videos. Thank you for watching.